All right, well, we might move on then with respect to those considerations about multi-parameter monitoring using data acquisition with satellite telemetry, and then hand it over to Neil just to talk about some of the costs associated with the plans, keeping it very broad, because obviously every application is different. But I did make mention, I wasn't sure if it was the last presentation or the first presentation, was that we're tapping into an engine, a Bosch Rexroth engine management unit that's been utilised for a dewatering pump in an open cut mine, and they're paying about $100 a month to access that information via the big and silver plan.
So thanks, Paul. I guess when we look at cost, when you associate satellite, everyone thinks, whoa, hang on, we've got some costs, and typically the capex and the opex is a consideration. What a lot of people don't realise is the cost for satellite communications in remote areas is tumbling dramatically, and when you look at it, I mean, I recall when we're doing tracking NextG versus satellite, and people would say, oh, but I can go to Telstra and buy my megabytes at X. And what Telstra didn't tell you is what your minimum billable increment is going to be. So you might send, your 160 bytes in a message, but it's just cost you, 250k in a minimum billable increment, because that's the minimum they can bill you. So it adds up real quick. So I'm not saying that's in every case, but when we're looking at costing, so on the IP side, we're buying traffic or data on a per megabyte basis. That's what we buy from Inmarsat at, and we resell it to you guys on a per megabyte basis. Now, when there's bigger projects, it could be, we've done that for the likes of Ergon, where they've got what they call a SCAP plan for their reclosers. They've got multiple SIM cards, all utilising or eating off one account, a pooled account. Now, that has obvious benefits, because you've got some SIM cards that may be using a very small amount of traffic and some that are very large, and the SCAP just makes a nice average across the group of SIMs. So there's so many different ways to cut it with the type of plan we give you, the way we cost it, and I guess it all comes down to sitting down and understanding what your project is, what you're trying to do. Is CapEx or OpEx more important? And then looking at the difference between like the Skywave or the IP. So is it message based, is it IP based? So there's a whole host of different plans that we can draw. I can't stand here today and say it's going to cost you $100 a month to run your per terminal to run your application, because I don't know what you're trying to do and how many messages. And again, we were talking to Dwayne earlier, and he was saying that in the US on their gas wellheads they were using like 4 kilobit for doing X, Y, and Z a day, and on their wellhead platform with their gas platforms. And then we talked to another guy and they're saying, oh, well, hang on, we're using megabits, and every application is different, and the data requirement is different. So whether we're looking at a messaging platform or whether we're looking at pooling a large number of IPs, megabytes across a large volume of terminals, we'll find the appropriate plan. But the message is it's not as expensive as you think it is, if you're looking at it from a project basis. So if you come to me or Paul and say, I just want one terminal and I want a plan to do X, well, it may appear expensive for that one particular terminal, but if you've got a project, you want to scope it as a project, that's where we're really good at sitting down and working out what the most appropriate plan would be. So I think it's hard to really definitively answer your question of how much it's going to cost. Give me a scenario and we'll work it out. But I would certainly challenge you that it's not as expensive as you think it is. Satellite, I mean, we did recently, it's not SCADA related, but I'll give you an idea. We had a gas customer that had a pipeline they wanted to maintain, and they had these vehicles running down the pipeline. So they were looking at putting up a radio network down the pipeline. That was going to cost them $5 million and take 2 years to implement. We did the same radio backhaul over satellite we implemented it within 2 months. It was installed at a fraction of the cost. It was $200,000-$300,000 or something. So that is a scenario where terrestrially you have to look at your cost to deliver that, both capex and opex, and the time to deliver that. Moreton Bay Water, I recall not so long ago, Moreton Bay was backhauling their telemetry to up on the hill there, and they put in a massive mast up there, cost them $650,000 to put a bloody mast up to backhaul their free radio telemetry. Well, let me tell you how many megabytes I could have sold you with a little terminal on the ground for 650 grand. I would have run you long past, the 6-year requirement or whatever it was. So you've got to really look at it from a lot of different perspectives when it comes down to cost. And that's why you've got to engage with us. You've got to talk to us, you've got to tell us what you're trying to do. We'll find a cost-effective way to do it that makes sense, it comes in budget. And sometimes, you've got to also take your capex and your opex, put it together and scope your project, because people always think, oh, well, radio's free. Well, how much is that tower going to cost to put it up, to repeat that? You know what I mean? So that's the challenge today, is think about your capex and your opex when you're deploying, and come talk to us about how we can help you to find a cost-effective solution for it. Does that kind of cover some of your questions? Have you got anything more specific that you want to ask? Or?
Well, really, it's ballpark figures. Like, we're used to using Inmarsat, and we went away from it because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
Quite a few years ago. It wasn't expensive to have it sitting there. That was a dial-up system. And it was killing us just getting the data.
Yeah.
Then we've gone to a global star system, which we think is reasonable, and we run about 100, I guess, satellite sites,
Yep.
and that runs at around about $30 a month. When you've got 100, the difference between $30 a month and $100 a month is substantial. It's a real killer.
Of course.
And look, technology changes.
That's right.
And you go. One of the discussions we had with I think it was the guy from Arrow earlier is we were saying about the iridium SBD and getting locked into proprietary systems, and now when they come to look at it, they can't just change parts of that, because remember, everything that they've built on top of that is built around proprietary systems. And so what we're saying is the industry is taking a bit of a turn now, and saying, no, hang on, we're going to move away from those sort of proprietary systems and try and get, like when we're talking about backhauling data, we're talking about taking, whether it's NextG or IP from a VGAN, I will take it in my pop, and then we can deliver it on the same last mile as your Telstra Whippers or what have you. I mean, what we've got to look at is as the technology moves, how do we deliver a more cost-effective solution for what you're trying to do? So your technology, you're talking about, from the old circuit switch there. What are you talking about from your Inmarsat technology?
Yeah, we're going back 10 years.
Yeah. So again, quantum leap. I mean, you start looking at that now, you will find that will be far more cost-effective to deploy compared to your global star. I would hazard a guess.
If you compare that on global star today, that's probably about a quarter of the price of global star.
Yeah.
Because so you got to do eggs on comparison.
Yeah.
So like the Skywave network is, I guess, global star ring, right, in comparison. Yeah. So and the technology and reliability, I guess. I'm just saying, if you look at the availability of the Inmarsat network compared to, I guess, our competitors, we're the only satellite network which gives 99.9% availability.
And also the technology that you have in the field. So you're looking at what you deployed in the field versus what's available today and how you would deploy that.